Help others. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.
Shalom. My name is Joseph Shulam, and I'm doing another MindCandy, a new MindCandy. This MindCandy is unusual because it deals with topics that we don't normally deal with. Israel is in the middle of a horrible war with a terrorist organization supported by Iran. There are two of them. One is the Hamas in Gaza, and the other one is in Lebanon, the Hezbollah, that is directly connected to Iran. And this war has already cost a lot of lives on both sides, obviously more on the Hamas side in Gaza. It all started on the 7th of October when over 3,000 men cut the fence between Israel and Gaza and entered into Israel with cars equipped with large caliber machine guns on top of the pickups, motorcycles, scooters, every kind of vehicle you can imagine, and attacked a group of young people that had an event like Woodstock, not far from the Gaza border, slaughtered 1,300 people in horrible ways. I mean, it's not just shoot them, no. They beheaded them, they raped the women, gang raped the women, and then shot them. Sometimes during the rape, they also mutilated their body parts, their sexual parts, and took over 200 and some, close to 300 hostages. A lot of, not only from that Woodstock party, but also from homes in several kibbutz settlements and farm settlements and towns around Gaza. And it was a horrible massacre, a real massacre of innocent people. And they took babies and shot their parents. And it's hard to describe everything horrible that happened here. I don't even want to try to describe all the horrors that happened on that day, 7th of October. Israel was caught not ready. The reason was why Israel was caught not ready, because in the last 3 or 4 years, our government concentrated on a horrible attempt to destroy Israeli democracy, the only democracy in the Middle East, by neutering the Supreme Court and the rights of the Supreme Court to criticize wrong, illegal government laws that they could pass because they had a majority in the parliament. The extreme zealot right-wing parties that gathered together there under this coalition led by our Prime Minister, Mr. Bibi Netanyahu. And that horror brought about Israel's response to that massacre. But I don't want to talk about the massacre or the politics around it. I just mentioned it as the reason why I'm doing this MindCandy. I'm doing this MindCandy for 2 reasons. One is to explain the roots of this deep, deep, demonic hate that the Palestinian Arabs in Gaza, the Hamas, but not only them, some of the other Palestinians as well, have against Jews, but not only against Jews, also against Christians. There have been Christians martyred and massacred in Gaza in most horrible ways. I know myself, the guy that was manning the Bible Society, the British and International Bible Society in Jerusalem, in the Arab side of Jerusalem, in the east side of Labib Madanat was his name. So he was transferred to man the Bible Society bookshop in Gaza. They massacred him in the street in front of his wife and his children, cut him to pieces and paraded the pieces of his body through the streets of Gaza. So they did horrible things. Burned people alive in their houses on the 7th of October. So Israel responded. But I don't want to talk about that and the war and the politics. This is just to mention as a background what motivated me to do this teaching. So one of the reasons is I want to explain the relationship of Islam with the Jewish people based on the Muslim and on the Hadith, on the commentaries that were written after the Quran. But I want to start with a Jew that lived in the 12th century. His name was Moses, the son of Maimon, the son of Obadiah. In short, he's called Maimonides in English, Rambam in Hebrew. He was born one day before the Passover in 1135, according to Western calendar, 4995 according to the Hebrew calendar. He was born in the city of Cordova, Spain. At the close of the 500 years of the golden age of the Jews, the only golden age of the Jews in the history of Judaism, was in Spain, 500 years, and the 12th century was the end of those 500 years. During those 500 years, Islam offered the Jews equality and complete freedom to practice their Jewish faith. It allowed the Jews to flourish in Spain. There were some of the greatest rabbis in Jewish history were in Spain during those 500 years and produced great books and writings and contributed to all of humanity. Like Rabbi Judah Halevi, great poet, great philosopher, great rabbi, and Abarbanel, and Rabbeinu Bachya, and Gershonides, and Nachmanides. All these great rabbis were during this in Spain under Muslim rule most of the time, and then when Christians reconquered Spain in the Reconquista, then the Christians came in, and then the troubles took place. The Jews were finally expelled in 1492, the same year that Christopher Columbus discovered the New World, discovered America. The end of these 500 years of the golden era of the Jewish history under Muslim rule came from a radical Almohades Muslim sect that took power in Morocco in 1846. A little bit, 11 years after the birth of Maimonides. In other words, when the Almohades took power in Morocco, Maimonides was 11 years old. And the government of the Muslim empire at that time, and especially from Morocco, gave the Jews and the Christians an ultimatum of conversion to Islam or death. The king Ibn al-Mumin believed that the existence of the Jewish tradition and that the Jewish Messiah would redeem the Jews 500 years after the revolution, after the revelation of Muhammad in 622. However, by the year 1146, it was evident that the Messiah had not arrived, and in his opinion, this was a sign that the Jews must convert to Islam. And in order for the Jews to convert to Islam, there was a law passed that Jews that don't convert to Islam will live under Islamic law. It's called Netivyah, and they will have lesser rights than equal citizens as they did before, and they will be discriminated by law, and that is called in Hebrew Iggerot Hashmad. In other words, they were not given much chance to live a good life like they had before under Islam. Entire Jewish communities in Cordoba, Granada, and other cities and centers of Jewish life in Spain, in Morocco, and in around Morocco, Western North Africa, converted to Islam in order to keep their properties, to keep their jobs, to survive. Among them also was the family of Maimonides. The family of Maimonides. So when Maimonides grew up, he became a very famous medical doctor and a philosopher and a great Bible scholar, wrote commentaries of the Mishnah and medical books and many books connected with philosophy and with religion and with Judaism. But he also wrote some letters. The most famous two letters that he wrote more than two, but the most famous two letters that he wrote, one was a letter to Yemen, that same Yemen that is at the bottom of the Arab South Peninsula, on the Red Sea, and in the Gulf of that now is being attacked by Yemenites, attacking American ships and Israeli ships and international ships, pirating them. And America and Britain bombed Yemen just recently, several times. So he wrote a letter to the Yemenites, and he also wrote a letter, it's called the Letter of Conversion, Iggerot Hashmad. And that letter of conversion was written by Maimonides in response to another rabbi that was a Christian who converted to Judaism. His name was Obadiah the convert. And in that letter, Obadiah the convert wrote that it is an absolute sin to convert to Islam or Christianity, a sin that is worth death. In other words, it's better for you to die than to convert. So that was the motivation that Maimonides wrote that letter of conversion. In that letter of conversion that Maimonides wrote, is very interesting and very important for us, especially for Messianic Jews. Very interesting, very important for us and for the rest of Judaism. Instruction. The big thing about that letter of conversion that Maimonides wrote, remember that his own family had converted when he was 13 to Islam. And then he became the chief private doctor of the caliph, the ruler of the greatest empire ever existing in the world, from the Atlantic Ocean on the 1040 parallel all the way to the end of Asia, to the Pacific Ocean. So that Islamic empire, Maimonides was the doctor of the caliph, of the ruler of that empire. So Maimonides' reasons, and he wrote it when he was actually in Morocco, in Fez, the city of Fez in Morocco, at the age of 24. In that letter, he reasons the following reasoning. First of all, that conversion to Islam, in order to survive and not to die and not to lose your house, your job, your property, your livelihood, is okay if you continue to practice Jewish law that was not forbidden by Islam at that point in history. That's very important for us today. As believers in Yeshua, as Jews that believe that Yeshua, a fellow Jew, is the Messiah. Yeah. My parents, when I believed in Yeshua and was baptized at the age of 16, the same day that I was baptized, I was kicked out from home because in their view, I stopped being a Jew. Not in my view. Not in my view, and not in the view of the people that I heard, the gospel from. I never stopped being a Jew. Neither did Paul, Peter, James, or any of the other apostles. There is nobody in the whole New Testament that called himself a Christian. Others, pagans in Antioch, called them Christians. They never called themselves Christians. Paul says 5 times, I am a Jew, I am a Hebrew, and I am an Israelite. I am a Pharisee of the Pharisees in the letter of the Philippians. And when it comes to Jerusalem in Acts chapter 20, or 20 or 21, I don't remember right now, I don't have my Bible open. But in verse 20 also, he says that when James meets Paul and Paul's disciples, the 7 disciples that came with him to the land of Israel, to come to Jerusalem to worship in the temple, they say, look, brothers, so how many tens of thousands of Jews we have, and they're all zealous for the Torah. That was the early church. And I'm not committed to the councils of the church from Antioch or from Istanbul, which is Nicaea, across the bay of Nicaea. And I'm not committed to Santa Claus. I'm a Jew. I never stopped being a Jew, just like the apostles didn't. And the early church, the Jews remained Jews in the land of Israel, but not only in the land of Israel, also in the diaspora. They celebrated the Passover. They were commanded to celebrate the Passover. So Maimonides, in this letter of conversion, does something that is very important for us today. He says that in order to survive and not to lose your life and your livelihood and your property and everything, it's okay to say that Muhammad is a prophet and that there is only one God, because Paul himself says in 1 Corinthians chapter 8 verse 6, we have one God. So Paul didn't stop being Jewish. Neither did the other apostles. And so Maimonides says, in order to survive, it's okay to convert to Islam, and even if it's hypocritical to do so, because you never intend to stop being Jewish, you do it to survival, and survival, life is more precious than just about anything. There's only two commands in Judaism and in the Bible for which you die and you don't succumb to them. One of them is idolatry, to worship idols, that you die. We have examples mentioned in the New Testament of Hannah and her 7 sons in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11 or 13. I think chapter 11 of Hebrews, of a mother that saw her 7 sons killed in most horrible ways, and not worship the idol that Antiochus Epiphanes put in different places in the land of Israel. Yes, fascinating. So Maimonides writes this letter. It spreads all over the Jewish communities around the world in his days in the 12th century. That helps Jews cope with the Inquisition that starts later on in the 14th century. That letter, the letter of conversion by Maimonides. And it should help us today too, because the concept of Jewish evangelism by both Christians, and I've experienced it on my own self, is that if you believe in Jesus, you stop being Jewish. And you stop celebrating the Passover. Even though the church is commanded to celebrate the Passover too, the Gentiles are commanded in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. But I experienced this battle with some of the big shots in Nashville, Guy Woods and others, that they said, if you believe in Jesus, you can't come. Until I showed them the scripture, and then they said, as long as you don't do it for salvation. There's no Jew celebrating Passover for salvation. It's for memory of the greatness of God's acts to save his nation out of slavery into freedom. Yes. So in the end, Guy Woods himself got convinced and said, it's okay for you to celebrate the Passover. Thank you, Mr. Woods. God bless you wherever you are now. But this letter of conversion is very important, and it will become much more important as Jewish disciples of Yeshua understand it and restore their life as Jewish disciples of Yeshua, not as Baptists, not as Pentecostals, not as Church of Christ, not as evangelicals, not as Catholics, not as anything else. Jewish disciples of Yeshua, just like Paul and Peter and the apostles and the early church did. There were Jewish disciples and Gentile disciples, one in Christ. Now back to the war and to the source of hatred, that hatred that caused that 7th of October 2023 massacre of women, old people, young people, children, babies were torn out of their mother's stomach and decapitated in front of their parents and grandparents and their brothers and sisters. Yes, horrible things. That the source of that hatred, which is the source of the reason for this war that we are fighting now. And every Christian in the world should start praying for Israel, standing with Israel, demonstrating for Israel, raising the Hebrew Jewish flag with the Star of David, the white and blue flag with a big blue Star of David in the middle of it. Because the source of our war is the same problem that existed in the days of Ezra and Nehemiah, when Cyrus, the king of Persia, sent the Jews and gave them the money to return to Jerusalem, to rebuild it, and to restore the temple. And Ezra and Nehemiah were the leaders. They were ministers in Cyrus's government. Yes, when they came back, who objected to their return? Who objected to their rebuilding of Jerusalem? Who objected to their restoration back to the land that God gave to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Sanballat the Arab, the neighbors, the Arab neighbors who are actually our distant relatives, sons of Esau, the brother of Jacob, sons of Ishmael, the brother of Isaac. All the nations around us, the Arab nations, are kind of distant cousins. And that hatred, demonic hatred that has brought the Arabs to hate us so much, is even ignoring the Quran itself, because in the Quran, the Jews are called Imam al-Kutab, the people of the book, and they're commanded to honor the Jews. Later on, the commentaries on the Quran are the ones who say that the Jews have to live as inferior citizens, inferior people, if they don't convert to Islam. Yes, it's a religious war, folks. The war between Israel and Hamas, Israel and the Palestinians, Israel and the Arabs, is a religious war. Not that the Jews want to impose Judaism on the Arabs. It's the Arabs want to impose Islam on the world. And if you think that the Muslims in Europe are not trying to do the same now to the Europeans and to the Christians, you're wrong. Every Muslim student going to a Western country to study in colleges and universities is indoctrinated before he receives the permission to go there with Islam, and is a missionary of Islam. I can give you examples of people, Christian people that I know from Germany who studied in Israel, girls that married Muslims and got pregnant. And in order to marry and not be left pregnant with a baby that an Arab made with them, they had to convert to Islam. I know girls, Baptist girls, Church of Christ girls, that studied in Germany, and Muslim students there. There are millions of them in Europe. Europe has swallowed the gauntlet of Islam. And there are cities like in Sweden, like Malmo and others, that if you're not a Muslim and you go there and walk around the streets and you're noticed, you may feel the discrimination, may feel also the violence that will come upon you in some of the neighborhoods. They may stop you and ask you for your wallet or your iPhone. And if you don't give it in these neighborhoods, you could even get killed. Yes, great violence. So my dear brothers and sisters, this is MindCandy, not a sweet candy. But it's a MindCandy that you need to start praying for your own countries, for your own communities, and especially for Israel during this war. And stand with us. We are doing a great job changing the very paradigm of what it means to be a Jewish disciple of Yeshua, because of all the great things that God has used us to do for the military, and because of all the Jewish believers who excelled and excel in the battle for the survival of the Jewish state and the Jewish people in their homeland that God gave to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as an eternal inheritance. May God bless you. This is Joseph Shulam from Jerusalem, MindCandy.
Help others, like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.